heard that, of course, that you have Emmys and stuff, but what type of projects? What type of projects have you worked on specifically?
Television projects? Well, I've worked on a lot of things. So I've done my own program on PBS, which is actually shown nationally on through American Public Television. So I'm on all over the country with that program.
Wow.
And all over the world, really. But it's that project's been ongoing since October of 2005. So
oh, wow.
for about 11, almost 12 years now, we've been working on that show. So we started out as really just a South Carolina focused program, and then it grew into more of a national focus, and now worldwide focus. So we've done shows from the top of the Arctic to the tip of South America.
So from that, what landed you here? Were you doing?
Right.
Were you director of here before or after?
No. So actually, my background is I was schooled in classics first. English, but I eventually got a degree in biology and chemistry, and went on to get my PhD in biology, but it was plant-centered. So my entire career really has been focused on plant exploration, what we call taxonomy, discovering new species of plants, naming new species of plants, and trying to figure out the relationships between the species that we already know about, so that we have a better understanding of plant biology, ecology, conservation, and evolution. My whole goal, kind of my life goal, starting about 20 years ago, was to get people to realize how important individuals are, not just collectively the human race is in shaping the world around us and shaping the world that our children and grandchildren are going to have to live with, but how important the choices of every single person are. And so here at the Botanical Garden, and my TV show, and all of the articles, my research, everything I do is really geared towards that mission of getting people to kind of accept that fact that you're really, really important, and just the things you do in this world are going to end up changing the world. So we have, here for instance at the garden, that's one of our core values, is instilling the sense of importance of your personal choices and shaping the world around you. And so our first TV show we ever did, and one of the exhibits out here in the garden are about these unusual middens of oyster shells that occur off the coast of South Carolina. And these are piles of oyster shells that were put down during the late Archaic period. And in the case of one of my favorite sites, we know how old it is. It's 5,200 years old. And some of these sites are really huge. People were collecting oyster shells and building these large structures that were larger than a football field and 30 feet tall, made out of oyster shell. And these are the largest man-made structures in North America from the late Archaic period. But in other cases, it's just like a little bucket of oyster shells where somebody had a low country boil and threw a bucket of oyster shells. But they did it 5,200 years ago. And if you go out into the forests on the outer coastal plain of South Carolina, in places like Fig Island off of Edisto Island, you can be walking across the island and you're walking through this habitat where it's like live oaks and palmetto trees and pines and cedars that we think of being part of low country flora. And then suddenly you'll come across a sugar maple tree that normally would grow in Canada or in the mountains, but here it is in Charleston County where we don't think about it belonging. And the reason it's able to grow there is because the shell that somebody dumped a bucket on the ground 5,200 years ago contains calcium carbonate, which raises the soil pH, which allows deciduous plants to grow where evergreen plants that don't need as much nutrients to grow can grow. So think about how significant that is. Somebody threw a shell on the ground 5,200 years ago, and it changed the world forever, right? Now how much bigger the choices we make every day in our life, and it really shows you that, your great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandson or granddaughter may not know who you were, but the world never forgets the choices we make, and every one of us is powerful. Our garden is 295 acres, 10,000 species, varieties, and cultivars of plants, but just as much part of our garden are the birds. 206 species of birds have been documented in this garden, most of any in garden in America. 18 species of frogs and toads, and countless insects. And the way we manage this garden is different than most gardens in America, most gardens in the world, because we have what we call a holistically managed garden, or a garden for life. So we manage for diversity in all types. We want diversity of people. We want everyone to be here. We don't want to exclude anybody. We don't charge admission. We never will, with my dead body, charge admission, because I want everyone, regardless of what their needs are, to be able to use this garden. But we also are doing and making choices like not using neonicotinoid pesticides that have been shown to disrupt pollinators and kill the pollinators that come to feed on the nectar and the pollen on plants. We don't use those on the landscape. We actually minimize the use of chemicals altogether on the landscape. We only use them as last-ditch efforts to keep major collections around. And as a response to that, we've seen this surge in life, so that half of our visitation has come from people that want to watch the animals that are in the garden, not necessarily plants. And so for me, that's the confirmation of what my mission, kind of what what I've always known my mission from I was a little boy, is when I come out in the garden and I see a Chinese family, and a family of immigrants that are here in the garden, or and people who have lots in their pockets, and people who have nothing, and they're all coming together and laughing and connecting. Would they know they're learning something or not? Just the fact that they're touching nature is making a huge difference. So it's about diversity, it's about life.
That you talk about the the plants and the wildlife that's here, but I saw that there's like the Hunt's cabin and different things that were brought in.
Sure.
So what part does that play into the botanical garden, the different non-life exhibits that you have?
Right. So we're also cultural here, because we don't draw the decision. I mean, that's nice you said that, because like another barrier I try to break down in people's minds when they visit the garden, if they around me at all, or if they read any signs in the garden, they're going to find out that we're breaking the barrier, because we tend to think of the world as falling into the category of nature, which is a part from man, and man-made world, which is a part of man, right? And we know for like the past 18,000 years, the two have, in this part of the world, these two have sort of gone hand in hand.
Right.
So people play a part. That culture is part. There's no distinction between nature and culture. They're part of one and the same thing. So we have these cultural elements in the garden. We have the Hanover House, which was built in 1716. It's the second oldest wood frame structure in South Carolina. It was moved from Berkeley County to up here when Lake Moultrie was flooded. We have the Hunt Cabin, which was moved from Seneca over to here a couple decades ago, and it was built in 1826. And that sort of illustrates what pioneer life was like in the Low Country and in the upstate during that time. And what we've tried to do in those instances is use that as a teaching tool to look at blurring that line between nature and culture. So when you go into the Hunt Cabin on weekends, we have it open and you see natural fibers, natural wood products, and then also we try to talk about all the cultures and how they concept. Because you look at that cabin, and the old signs would have said this cabin was built by Ransom Hunt in 1826. But yes, it was built by Ransom Hunt. It was built by Ransom Hunt slaves. Okay.
Gotcha.
So we really since before I got here, at the garden we were really trying to pull in all the cultural components of that.
What do I have to do? You have to squeeze it.
Both of them?
Are you
Well,
all
you
done?
can.
Maybe not. Are you all done with your cup?
Kind of do
Oh,
that.
thank you.
Want to do it? Yeah, you got it. It's not easy.
Oh yeah, you're gonna give that to mommy?
This one's fuller than the other one. Is it?
You want to tell her? How old are you?
And we kind of have this thread of Black history that runs through the garden, but we don't have the dedicated area. So one of our major next steps, which is a project we're designing next year, we hope to build in 2019, is is right down below us here.
Okay.
But this huge sort of bowl-shaped area. And what I want to do there is I want to have cotton, indigo, and Carolina gold rice. And I want to build 3 ponds down there where Carolina gold rice we can grow in one pond. We can have a pond up above that serves as a reservoir for flooding that field so that we can grow the Carolina gold rice there. But abandoned rice fields are what we're going to kind of illustrate there, because the fact that those rice fields were created during the 1700s and later maintained all the way into the early 1900s when rice was finally pushed out of culture. Right. Those old rice fields are where we visit when we visit Bear Island or we visit these wildlife refuges. We go down and they're the most productive wildlife habitats, aquatic wildlife habitat in the world. And we look at them and we're like, oh man, isn't this great? All these ducks. And folks go down there and they shoot ducks and they think, oh, this is great. These are just wonderful wetlands. They're the most productive wetlands. And nobody recognizes the fact that the technology to build the wetlands and all of the work that went into building the wetlands was provided by human chattel. And we forget that part of the history. And I always tell people, never, ever, ever, every talk I do when I talk about that, it's such a poignant thing. I'm like, when you go down there, never take for granted that those ducks, the fact that wood storks are breeding there in that rookery, the fact that you can see these birds right here, and the fact that we have all these alligators and all these things growing there, never forget where it came from. Right. Because we've overlooked that whole part of our history. We've shoved it kind of aside because it ain't pretty. Right?
I got you.
So we really want that to be part of the focus down here, where a friend of mine, June Carney, wrote a book called Black Rice. Right. She's out in California. If you haven't read it, you need to read that book. There's one awesome, powerful book. So the technology to build those rice trunk gates and things, that came from West Africa. And it didn't come in on the minds of those English planters. It came in because the Africans that were brought here were specifically brought here because they were already familiar with the rice culture.
Gotcha.
And they brought the technology, and they came up with the technology that we used here, right?
Wow.
So that credit is another thing that has not really, until recently, come to light. And then on the other side, we have this nice little grove of trees over there, and I really want to do a African American antebellum lifestyle home and garden, where plants that came from African roots like gumbo and melons and sesame, benny, we call it when we cook with it here, cowpeas, black-eyed peas, things that actually were brought with the migration, forced removal across Africa to here, that are still part of our culture that we forget about, right? We forget about where it comes from. But we also don't want to forget about the fact that we're illustrating a nice little European house from that time. We're sort of illustrating a cabinet from that time.
Gotcha.
We're not illustrating the people that actually built the things and how they were living, Gotcha. So I've been working with Dr. Drew Lanham, he's a wildlife biologist here too, who's he just wrote a book called Home Place, which is incredible. He's amazing. He's my best friend, and he's amazing. But his focus, his research is on black land and how that's changed, why it is, where it is, and that relationship that African Americans have with land. And so we're working with that, and I'm super excited about where that project goes, because that'll be like the next big thing to seal up and make sure that every cultural group in South Carolina has a connection here in the garden that represents all the people of South Carolina.
Yes, gotcha. So I guess to wrap it up a little bit, seems like I've walked around a little bit. It's beautiful. Yes. Is there any way that the Clemson community, Clemson students, anybody can, volunteer, internship, that type of stuff?
All the above.
Okay.
So the Botanical Garden depends on students. So we hire around 60 to 70 students a year to work study, and just out and out hire student hires if we can't fill everything with work study, because sometimes we need expertise in all those areas we just talked about. We need people who can lend student help, can lend their expertise if that's their field they excel in. Okay. So we hire students here. We also provide opportunities for internships, whether that's working through a professor on campus that might want to do a project out here, whatever. We host 2,700 students a year. We host 7,200 students a year on average out here, using the garden or the museums in one way or the other. as a educational resource. On average, it's 7,200 students a year using this card.
Wow.
So students can be involved in any way. We also have a huge volunteer force out here. And if you can't get here to work for pay, you know, if you don't qualify for work study, or you're not one of the people that is selected to be the few that we actually hire for, you know, standard student wage
Right.
to work out here, we'd love to have you involved in any way you can be involved in volunteering to help in this critical area.
Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Thank
Yeah,
you.
you're welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.